Hi, hello, and welcome to the rest of the Chapter 4 lecture that we did not get to cover in class. First off, I want to apologize for not being able to finish everything in time. Things are a little bit hectic at the beginning of the semester, but hopefully the timing should work out better for the rest of the course. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up the rest of the slides from Chapter 4 that we didn't get to cover in class. So first off, let's finish up talking about attachment. Okay, so we left off last class talking about the different theories of attachment. Okay, we talked about Freud, we talked about Harlow, and we talked about Bowlby. Now, in addition to sort of theorizing about why attachment takes place, there was a woman named Mary Ainsworth who was more interested in the different types of attachment that children could have with their primary caregiver, usually mom. Okay, so she developed this protocol called the strange situation. Now, the strange situation is a very specific protocol. Okay, so what happens is mom and baby go into the lab together. The lab usually has, some comfortable chairs, some toys, or as you can see here in this picture. So mom and baby go in and they have some time to relax by themselves. Then a stranger, usually a woman, comes into the room, speaks with mom for a couple minutes, and then mom gets up and leaves, and the stranger and the baby are alone in the room together for a few minutes. And then mom comes back and the stranger leaves. Okay, so this is always the protocol that's followed during this strange situation. Now, Mary Ainsworth, she was able to do observations of children when they were in the strange situation. Usually we do the strange situation with children who are about 1 year old. And what she observed were different patterns of behavior from the children in this strange situation. And so she came up with 4 classifications for the children and their attachment to their mother. First off, we have children who are securely attached. All right, in this case, the children, when they go into the room together, baby seems comfortable enough to explore, mom is there, and so the baby is like playing. And then when the strange woman comes in, we see that the child does that social referencing that we talked about with mom. So looks at mom seems to be okay, so the baby's like, okay, cool, stranger, whatever, I'm going to keep playing. Then when mom leaves, the infant is sort of like mildly upset. So maybe cries a little bit, maybe tries to look for mom, maybe exhibits a little bit of that separation protest that we had discussed. But when mom comes back, the infant is happy, reunites with mom, and all is good in the world again. All right, we also see, however, that we have insecure avoidant attachment. Okay, in this situation, when mom and baby come into the room together, baby's like, ooh, toys, bye, mom. And then when mom leaves, the baby is not really upset. It's like, oh, okay, you're leaving? Okay, bye. And then when mom comes back, the baby's like, oh, you're back, whatever. All right, so in this case, the baby doesn't really seem that attached to mom. All right, in addition to that, we have insecure resistant attachment. With this insecure resistant attachment, we see that the infant seems to be overly attached to mom, too clingy. All right, so when they come into the room together, the baby's like, oh my gosh, it's a new environment, and holds on to mom for dear life. And when mom tries to leave, when the stranger comes in, when the stranger comes in, the baby's like, oh my God, there's a stranger, and holds on to mom and is like burying its face in mom. And then when mom leaves, mom has to pull baby off of her and put the baby down. And when mom leaves, the child screams bloody murder. It's like someone is killing that child in there. Then when mom comes back, the child has been so worked up and so upset that he's sort of confused and like maybe runs to mom but then pushes her away, maybe hugs mom and then hits her. So we see some very strange behavior from this child. And again, it might be because the child was so worked up when mom left in the first place. All right, the last attachment style that we have here in the strange situation is insecure disorganized. And this is when the child is sort of confused in the situation or acts very fearful towards the parents. So like mom and baby come into the room and the baby like cowers in the other side of the room. When the stranger comes in, the child seems more relaxed. When mom comes back, the child is fearful and anxious again. All right, so we see that with this strange situation, all right, we see that of these 4 attachment styles, we see, of course, that securely attached children have an association with better outcomes. Okay, so for example, we see that for children who are securely attached, that's correlated with better emotional health, higher self-esteem, more self-confidence, and more social competence later on in life. All right, but something to consider here that has been an argument of some is that this protocol is a little bit culturally biased, all right, and that these outcomes are culturally biased. So in the United States, we greatly promote secure attachment because we want our children to be independent, but still, sort of attached to us. Now, in other countries, like in Japan, for example, the children may act in an insecure, resistant way here. And we might say, oh, that's indicative of sort of negative things. But in Japan, the norm is that only the mother really interacts and takes care of the infant. And so it would be weird for a stranger to come in and be left alone with the baby. And so children in Japan, or infants in Japan, are not as used to that and would be much more fearful, but that's not necessarily an indicator of anything bad. Another example here is that in Germany, they really promote children to be independent, and so a lot of German children exhibit this insecure, avoidant attachment style, but again, that's not really an indicator of problems, okay, with the attachment. That's simply the cultural expectation of how mom and baby are going to interact. So thinking about these attachment styles, does it matter? Okay, yes, we do see that it is a predictor of later functioning, right? We said that it was associated with all these positive outcomes when children are securely attached. And we do see that we have moderate consistency of these attachment styles across childhood and even across adulthood. Okay, there might be a couple of reasons for that. One is that it's this internal working model. Remember we talked about that at the very end of class last time. We said that when children develop an attachment with their mother, that's sort of their model or their blueprint for how relationships are supposed to work. All right, and so when children develop a certain style of connecting with another person, having a relationship with another person, they tend to use that same sort of attachment or relationship style with other people. The other thing is usually children are raised in a pretty consistent environment, and so if the environment remains consistent, then there would be no reason for the attachment style to change. However, I should note here that if the environment does change, so for example, maybe a death in the family, early on, maybe a divorce, a messy divorce that takes place, that can change attachment styles of children as well. All right, so at this point I want to talk about the developmental cascade model. All right, and the developmental cascade model says, yes, attachment is important, but it's more than that, okay? That the outcomes that children have are not just a matter of their attachment or not just a matter of whether or not they've developed this trust instead of mistrust, according to Erickson, right? That there's a lot involved in that a lot of these domains really connect to influence development. So attachment is important, but we also have to think about the temperament of the child, and that the temperament of the child also plays a role in the outcomes of their development, and that this is primarily influenced by their nature, right? We talked about temperament a little bit last class. We also see that there's an influence of culture, and the caregiving styles and the parenting styles in a given culture can influence how a child develops as well. All right, so the last question here about attachment is it important? Yes, of course, attachment is important, but it's only one of the predictor of outcomes for children. So if you're worried, if you know that your child is maybe insecurely attached, that's not a reason to think that your child is going to be doomed forever, because there's all of these other factors at play as well. All right, so the question, of course, is, okay, well, how do I make sure that my child is securely attached? All right, we have certain parenting styles that are associated with these particular attachment styles. Okay, let's start off with insecure resistant first. We see that for children who have parents who are sort of inconsistent, okay, sometimes they're there for their children, sometimes they ignore them, sometimes they seem resentful, they're a little bit less affectionate. We see that they tend to end up with this resistant attachment, where because the parenting is inconsistent, they're like, I don't know when you're going to be available for me again, so I'm going to stick close to you, I'm going to hold on to you for dear life. All right, we see that with a disorganized child, typically this is the result of neglect or physical abuse to the child. That's why the child seems fearful of the parent, because they've been perhaps abused or neglected by them in the past. All right, for securely attached children, we see that the parents are sensitive to the child's signals. So when the child is trying to communicate, say that they're hungry or they want something, if parents are sensitive to these signals and are available to respond to them, this is associated with a secure attachment. All right, lastly, we have this avoidant attachment, and usually with avoidant attachment, the parents tend to be unavailable to the child. They're a little bit rejecting or not responsive to what the child needs, and they have little physical contact with the child. And if they do respond to the child's needs, they might do this in sort of a resentful or angry or irritable way. All right, which is why the children are like, okay, well, you don't want to help me? I'm going to be independent and help myself. I'm going to be on my own, which is why you seem to notice that in the strange situation, the parents or the children don't seem all that attached to the parent in this insecure avoidant attachment style. All right, so let's talk about the family here a little bit, transitioning here. We see that the family is quite a complicated structure. We see that there are lots of different subsystems that interact together. So we have the husband and wife relationship, okay? Then we have the father-child relationship. We have the mother-child relationship. We have all three, okay, mom, dad, and child. If there are siblings, we have connections between the siblings, connections with each of the children and the parents, and all of these subsystems interact with one another. All right, if there is a problem in one of those subsystems, that absolutely impacts the other subsystems. So for example, if mom and dad are having marital problems, okay, their relationship is not strong, that is absolutely going to impact the way that they parent the children. All right, so when parents are transitioning to parenthood, we see that it's tough. There is this disequilibrium. Things are sort of thrown off to what they normally are, and the entire family has to sort of adapt. All right, and so we see that sometimes it's difficult because parents are trying to balance not only caring for this new infant, but also maintaining the relationship with each other, okay, the spouses, and also maintaining a career, perhaps, or maintaining relationships with other family members and friends. So it's sort of a difficult balancing act. All right, we also see that in the family, we notice something called reciprocal socialization, which is where parents and children socialize each other. All right, parents can really promote this by doing something called scaffolding, which is promoting turn-taking behavior. So a good example of this is playing peekaboo. Okay, so maybe the parent covers his eyes and then the child takes a turn. Okay, and this really helps to promote this reciprocal socialization, where there is this interaction, this turn-taking. All right, so I'm going to pause for now, and part 2 of this video will be coming up, so please make sure that you click on that. All right, thanks.